Being the dungeon master is hard. There is a lot of responsibility on you as the dungeon master, as you're behind your screen with all your notes and secrets hidden away from view as you try to entertain your players. And it's a very, very difficult job. I've been doing it for a long time, and I would like to think that I'm pretty good at it. I know I'm not perfect or incredible or whatever, but I have a fair amount of experience under my belt, and I wanted to take a moment to kind of give you a few tips or things that I've noticed and learned from my years of being a dungeon master. And a lot of the same things that I said when it comes to being a good player also applies to being a good dungeon master. The main difference is you are you're basically responsible for the fun of whatever current session or campaign that you're currently doing. And that's a lot of responsibility. I mean, a bad player can still ruin it, but man, a dungeon master can make or break a game. It absolutely does. If it's a really poor preset module or whatever, a good dungeon master can make it fun. If it's an amazing, incredible pre-made adventure, a bad dungeon master can ruin all of that and make those players not enjoy it or not enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, so many things. When people have their stories about Dungeons and Dragons or the tales they've recounted over the years, it always comes down to the fact that they had a good DM. And I think, what appeals to about being a DM, it's basically game design. You create these challenges in worlds and quest lines or whatever that you want to send your players through, and you kind of get an enjoyment of seeing how players would react to these challenges and courses that you've set up for them. If you've been playing something like Super Mario Maker and you like seeing how people react to your whatever sadistic Mario Maker level, it's kind of the same thing when it comes to being a dungeon master. You enjoy seeing people tackle on your obstacles and come up with new solutions. So, and that's why I really like being a dungeon master, just because that kind of game design stuff really fascinates me. So that being said, I'll start off by giving you the one biggest tip you could ever possibly have when being a dungeon master. Like this, just keep this one thing in mind, and as long as you have that and remember this, you'll become an amazing dungeon master and you'll have very, very enjoyable games. It's a really, really simple one. This is it. No matter, well, let me rephrase that. Whenever your players say something or do something or tell you they're going to do something or whatever, your response is yes. That's it. That's the big secret. Say yes. And there's a number of reasons why this is a really important thing to remember. The biggest one is that the players are in control of themselves. They are playing them. If one of their players says, I run up to the owl bear and arm wrestle it, and you tell them no, well then you're controlling their characters for them. And that takes the power away from them, and suddenly they get that feeling of being constricted in this grand open world where every possibility is before them, and you're telling them, no, not that possibility, well, you're taking away their fun. Now, if they're doing something stupid, like say arm wrestling an owl bear, you can let them know that's not a smart decision. An owl bear will probably murder you, or owl bears don't understand the rules of arm wrestling and will just bite you in the head instead. You can let them know that. But for the most part, whenever a player says they want to do something, you say yes and let them do it. You can come up with different roles or skill checks or saving throws or ability checks or whatever, so that if they want to do something kind of outlandish, they have to earn it. But it's really, really bad to outright tell anyone no when they want to play the game how they want to play it. That being said, there's some caveats to that, of course. You know, if someone's being that guy, you have to tell them, don't be that guy, don't be a dick, don't steal from players, don't try to fight each other, don't be an asshole, whatever. But you get what I'm saying. When you're playing the game and you have reasonable players and friends you can trust and they just want to have a good time and they say they want to do something, just say yes. You have this grand dungeon set up over in the old castle ruins and they say, we want to go to the mountains. You say yes. they'll get to that later, or maybe you'll repurpose that or something. But if they want to go that way, you let them go that way. And that's another note I actually had down here was you want to avoid that feeling of railroading people when it comes to playing your campaigns and adventures. This is something you can do when you're kind of first starting out, and maybe the players will kind of understand that you know, you're inexperienced, you're kind of getting the swing of things, so maybe this current adventure or campaign will be a little bit more linear than other ones, but for the most part, try to avoid that railroading. That's something I was really guilty of many years ago. I thought I had like this grandiose, cool world, but I realized I was really railroading people and being like, evil wizard guy is here, and the player's like, okay, I go there. It's like, you're here now, you did a thing. The next thing is here, and they're like, okay, I go there. And, I mean, that can work. Again, as a very basic adventure, that absolutely works, but you really want to give their players that sense of freedom and let them come up with their own solutions and adventures and whatever. Especially if they say yes, because they could possibly come up with new adventures or new plot lines or devices that you didn't even think of. And that can be some of the coolest stuff where that makes the players feel like what they did matter. And that's actually another really huge note, is whatever the players do, let there be consequences for it. And I don't necessarily mean consequences like punishment or whatever. There can be good consequences. If they help a town, make something about the town reflect that. If they don't help a town, let that be reflected. The town got destroyed, the town was razed, the people were kidnapped because they weren't there to do it. Or if they chose to help it, the town now sees them as heroes and they will recognize them on the street or will quickly approach them when new troubles arise. So that's another big thing. Aside from let there be consequence for their action, and by that I mean like let there be an impact for what they're doing, because that also helps get rid of that feeling of railroading where they're not just being led on this ride and adventure and just, you know, DM says go here, alright, here we are, but that way they feel like what they're doing actually has an impact. Related to that, when it comes to railroading, this is something I've absolutely done in the past. And I blame video games, to be honest, for this one, and you'll understand what I mean when I say it. When you get like a really cool story moment that you had planned for your adventurers, avoid the cutscene. Like I said, very much influenced by video games, and this is I've absolutely done this, and I've told players, no, this is happening right now. Basically, you have like a really cool moment show up. Players show up at an execution site, and a very important NPC is there, and you know the axe is going to come down and cut off her head. And you had planned, you know, in your notes like, her head cuts off, the players get mad, and this happens. But as you're saying this cutscene to them, you say, you know, he swings the axe up to bring it down, and then whatever spellcaster says, I cast hold person. Well, that changes everything. As a good DM, you would say, yes, you cast hold person. He makes his saving throw, he fails. The axe is now held up, and people are wondering what's going on. Suddenly that became a lot more interesting. The player's action had impact. They stopped this execution. They can get in there and help everyone. Now, as a bad DM, which was past Jared, I actually told them, no, this is happening. I have this cool thing that I had planned. Let this happen. And audibly and visibly, the players got really frustrated with that. And you don't want to frustrate your players. So you gotta be prepared for all of those possible outcomes. Yeah, so avoid the cutscene. Like, you can have cool story beats happen, but remember, your players aren't frozen in place as these things are happening. Another example I had was the players had shown up to a bad guy alchemist's headquarters lair or whatever, and he was basically monologuing, which is totally stupid. He was basically monologuing, and the monk of the group, Shin, played by Josh, who was also Tydra of the Blistabat fame, as he was monologuing, Josh, doing what Josh does best, says, I charge him! In the middle of like his grand speech that he had like scripted out and ready, and it was gonna be like super dramatic, and he didn't give a crap. He wanted to get in there and immediately like tackle him and bring him to the ground and stop him and maybe capture him and interrogate him and whatever. And being the butthole that I am, I said, hold on, I'm not done yet. You can't do that. Avoid the cutscene, let the players have their freedom, and let their actions reflect that. A couple other quick other options or advice that I have. There's a couple of mechanical things you can always do, like hide certain dice rolls. Like if someone says, "Oh, I use insight." You can, if you really want to, you can actually do the insight roll yourself with their bonus, and then just tell them, narrate whatever result to them. That way the player doesn't exactly know if they rolled high or low. They just got whatever result. That can make for more interesting, just to kind of keep the players in the dark a little bit. You can do the same thing for like bluff checks, stealth checks, persuasion, whatever. But you gotta be careful with that because you don't want to overuse it, because you're taking dice rolls away from the player, and the most fun you have in D&D is getting to roll that dice. So that's something I've done before. If you want to give like a really mysterious response, when it comes to something kind of pivotal or important, but that's something I've done before. Another thing you'll notice is that your players will frequently want to talk to people that you weren't prepared for. Whatever, a shop owner, a noble, or something, whatever NPC that you didn't have written down because you didn't think they were important, and suddenly your players want to talk to them. So with that, have a quick list of names just readily available at any point. Just jot down a bunch of male names, female names, human, dwarven, elven, tiefling, whatever. Just a bunch of different names, so that if they're talking to someone and they ask their name, you can say, bleh, Targus, that's one, or Widalow, whatever. Just shout out a name, because that alone, just giving them a name, suddenly gives this person a lot more personality, and they believe they're talking to somebody important, even if you didn't have them planned. It just makes their world feel a lot more alive and planned and prepared than they realize. Because chances are a lot of things that you had weren't prepared. In addition to that, if they, I kind of gave the example earlier where they said, oh, go to the castle ruins, and they choose to go to the mountains instead. Say yes, and say, oh, you find a bizarre dungeon in the mountains. Obviously you didn't have a dungeon prepared for those mountains. If you did have those castle ruins, you can take that, put that over into the mountains and say, there's your mountain ruins. They will have no idea. They thought you had something there the whole time. And that just lets them feel like they had freedom. And then after the session, you go back and make another castle ruins or reshuffle some things around or whatever. But don't be afraid to repurpose some things. Actually, speaking of dungeons, this goes different for everyone. But this is kind of a design philosophy I do whenever I'm making my... I always do homebrew campaigns, for the record. I've done a couple of pre-made adventures. Some of them are good. I don't think all of them are. I definitely prefer doing just homebrew stuff in my own settings. So with that, when I'm designing encounters, I try to keep a couple of things in mind. Two things, really. One is, why is this encounter important? And two, how can I make this encounter interesting? I try to make it so that it's hard. I try to make it so that every battle that you could possibly have isn't just a fight for a fight's sake. Monsters are there for a reason. Monsters are there actively doing something. They aren't just there for the sake of being monsters that the players can get experience points and treasure from. So you kind of like, you have to rationalize it, even just internally on your own notes, why they're doing that. Maybe you can kind of reflect to the players why they were there just based on their actions, especially if they sneak up on them. That way, every battle feels like it has a purpose instead of just being a battle for the sake of a battle. The other thing I try to do by making encounters interesting is, instead of saying, oh, you find 6 kobolds. Alright, roll initiative. Alright, what were the kobolds doing? Let's say they were ransacking a cart, a wagon or something. So they're currently onto this and they're trying to get whatever loot or treasures off that. And then the player saw them. The kobolds suddenly notice the players and then they get into battle. So they all take their weapons out and they immediately hide behind the wagon from the players, and a couple of them pop up using partial cover and start using short bows. It's like, okay, well now the ranged players have a harder target, and the melee players actually have to get up into it while trying to dodge all these arrows, so now there's a little more danger there. Maybe one of the kobolds is a spellcaster. That'll make things a little bit different. Maybe one of them has a mount, like a warg or a wolf or something that they're riding on. He has a lot of speed onto the battle. It's like, okay, that's a little more interesting. I've also done a lot of things with the environment. If they get into the always popular tavern brawl, let them use everything that's inside of a tavern. Let them pick up a chair and throw it. Maybe they'll flip over tables as cover, or pick up a dish and Captain America it or something. They have to take hot soup and splash it in someone's face. Those are all things that just, that's an interesting fight instead of just, I hit him, I stab him. Again, kind of going back to being a good player and describing actions and attacks and damage and all that instead of just saying, I do this. So I always try to think of interesting environmental obstacles or objects that they can use. Braziers with fire coals they can tip over, chandeliers, ropes, tapestries, a rug they can pull or set on fire, dried leaves that look like they could probably be set on fire really, really easily. Put them near a cliff, or they're caught in the middle of a rickety rope bridge that is clearly starting to collapse underneath the weight of all the gnolls trying to charge onto them. Those are interesting encounters that just, you're in a field and you find an orc and the orc is bad. Another thing you can do as a dungeon master is remember, all monsters and creatures, no matter how smart they are, generally want to live. If they are dying, or things around them are dying, and they realize that their fight is losing, they're going to try to run away. Let them run away. The players will still get the experience points because they defeated them. They don't have to kill them, they just have to defeat them. But again, that just makes it feel a little more believable. And then maybe you can make that into something important, as later on a monster they let get away ends up becoming a reoccurring villain or something. Just another sample of what you can do to make encounters interesting. The only other real thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, is, and this is the biggest point when it comes to being a dungeon master, and I've seen people kind of go back and forth about this, and I've talked about the rules lawyer, and the biggest thing, and I always keep this in mind whenever I'm playing, is that don't let the rules dictate your fun. And along with saying yes, I think that's the other big thing that you need to remember, because a lot of times people, you know, they'll go stick these books and they'll read through and remember every single little rule and like, all right, cool, I'm ready to go, let's do it. And they really follow these rules verbatim to the point where you're bogging your adventure down and slowing things down because you want to do it by the rules. You can do a lot of judgment calls as a dungeon master to make things more fun, and that's fine. I mean, all of these books, they're handbooks, they are guides, and they are manuals. But they're never like the rules, if that makes sense. You don't have to follow them 100%. You can tweak and change things to make things more interesting. You can just say, oh, I knock him over into the chasm or something. Instead of like, oh, well, you have to do an unarmed shove check and make an athletics check versus his dexterity, blah, blah, blah. You could just say, it's like, all right, make an attack roll. You did it. Or just say, if someone comes up with something really, really cool and be really, really interesting to see if it happens, you can just say, you did it. Or make them roll anyway and just have like a really roll difficulty class so that they probably will succeed. Don't be afraid to just change the rules, change what you have planned, ignore whatever just to make things more interesting and more fun. Because ultimately, like I said, you are responsible for the fun. And sometimes the rules can get in the way of that. And you know what? Forget the rules. Just try to have fun. And with that, along with saying yes, you will become a really good and a really fun dungeon master.